Let me show you how I made this ceramic vase in my home pottery studio. I'm starting to learn how to throw on a potter's wooden bat. I found that it's much easier to remove the ceramic piece afterwards without warping or disforming the vessel or shape in any way. So I begin by laying down some clay and then pressing the potter's bat on top. I then create a cone shape on that piece of clay like so and slam it down onto the potter's bat. I'll seal the clay with my index finger to the wooden board. Next, I'll just gently let the clay run between my hands and this will pull it together into a rough ball shape. Once it's come together, I'll then start coning and centering the clay, ensuring that all the clay is facing the same direction. This helps make it consistent and easy to throw later. Next, I'll open up the clay using my thumb before pulling in the walls so that it creates a conical shape sloping inwards. Next, I'll then start opening up the clay and pressing down the base to ensure that it's nice and solid at the bottom. I want to make sure that the edge between the bottom of the ceramic vessel and the walls on the inside are really sharp before I begin to pull. Once I've got this all sorted, I'll then start pulling. I've been really trying to focus on long, big pulls rather than lots of short, tiny ones. I found that this means I need to use less water and it ensures that the clay is a lot more consistent when throwing. Often when I use too much water, this can make the clay really weak and this then results in the form collapsing or warping slightly, as you can see here. So I've managed to sort out the bottom, but the top is just flaring out a little bit too much, so I'm going to collar it and just pull it off. As with most of the ceramic vessels that you make when you're beginning, you start off with much bigger ambitions for the clay and then you'll end up making mistakes, so you'll have to pivot and like I've done here, you end up with a slightly smaller vase. But in actual fact, I really like the finished piece and the size that it was. It feels a bit more personal, quite cute, quite small. And I think in future when I make ceramic vases, I'll probably use about a third less clay and make a smaller piece like this. Hopefully, similar to when I was learning ceramic bowls, as I begin to build confidence in creating this form and this shape, I can start beginning to make bigger and bigger forms. But for now, I think I'm going to scale it back and continue to make these smaller pieces here. So I really liked having a opening of the vessel that kind of splayed out here. So I spent a bit of time just perfecting that shape. So once it's all thrown, then wasn't able to remove any of the slip with a kidney. So I'm going to dry it out extra slow in this tub container here with some other pieces that I've thrown the same day. I brought this container from Argos. It was super cheap and it's really good for creating a potter's plaster bat, which I've done in a previous video if you want to check that out on my channel. And I'll leave it in here to slowly dry out over the next week. So a week has passed and the ceramic vessel is now leather hard and it's time to begin trimming it. So I'll place it down on the potter's wheel, tap center it till it's roughly the right shape. Unfortunately, the base is a little bit wobbly, which makes the top spin like you can see here. Because of the cone vessel shape at the top, I'm not able to flip it up and trim the base. I'll have to do that by hand later. So I'm going to spend a bit of time now just trimming up the walls and seeing if I can kind of compensate for that wobble. So I'm just using this small piece here and I'll begin to remove some chunks of ceramic clay, trying to get a consistent shape all the way around and correct for that wobble that we're seeing here. As I mentioned, I'll then flip the vessel and continue to do the same on the base later by hand. I found it really interesting carving away a vessel where it's got curves like this, as opposed to a bowl or a mug that I've tried previously where it's a bit more simple and straightforwards. I had to be extra careful and I couldn't really use some of the kidneys that I'd used previously. So I'm really just taking my time here and removing little chunks piece by piece. I wanted to make sure that the body of the vase was quite thick because I want to carve in a pattern later. And now I'm just using a wooden piece here to just correct that slight wobble in the opening of the vase and just tidy it up. The thickness was a bit inconsistent across the board. So it's now a nice, really clean, smooth shape, and the surfaces of the vase are pretty smooth. And I'm just now doing the neck here with this little wooden piece. So what I did after this was I just left it out on the bench for a few hours to dry off, went into town, got myself a milkshake, it was quite nice. And then when I came back, it was a lot more firmer, and this will allow me to come in and trim it later. So I'm just trimming up and correcting the base here, making sure it's as flat as I can get it by hand. It is much trickier doing this by hand than if I had something that I could rest the vase onto upside down in the wheel. I've seen other people use a kind of a bone dry ceramic piece to hold things in place. So I'll probably look at creating something like that in the future. So a couple of hours have passed now, and the clay is much harder again. So it's time to start carving out the surface of the clay and creating that pattern texture. I'm just using a pin here just to mark a level across the vase, and this will allow me to then come in and begin carving out chunks. I want these nice and deep so that when I eventually come to fire this piece, the glaze will pool in those indents that I'm creating, and it should hopefully create different colours and textures, and it'll all pool really nicely. I wanted the clay to be kind of a little bit rough, didn't want it to be too refined. I was hoping that by creating inconsistent chunks like this, it would give it a real kind of rough hand feel. So here's the final piece. Let me know what you think, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.